Good evening to all our listeners who are listening to us at this very hour, and also those who are watching us live on Facebook. I welcome you all to Talk to Aviation Expert program. And of course, this program comes to you every Saturday from 3 to 4 p.m. And today happens to be 25th of November 2023. Our broadcast time is 2 minutes past the hour of 3. This program is brought to you by Fly Ontime Aviation Sciences Academy. My name is Barry Johnson, and I have my co-host Cesar Gubang, yes, and of course Fly Ontime Aviation Sciences Academy. It is located next to Mobile Roundabout. It's inside Techno Building, the 3rd floor. Today happens to be the 4th edition of this very program, and in today's edition we are going to talk about the aviation industry itself. We're going to look at how the aviation industry was in the past, how is it now in the present, and how it's going to be in the future. We are not alone in the studio. We have a guest. We have an aviation expert, and with us in the studio is Captain David Martin Hassan. He is the technical advisor at the Ministry of Transport, and he is member of board of directors at the South Sudan Civil Aviation Authority. Captain David, you are welcome to iRadio.
Thank you very much, Baria, for the introduction, and thank you very much for being invited to talk to our people here through the iRadio.
Yes.
And thank you also to Ontime Aviation, for my son here, Cesar.
Yes. Yes, Cesar.
Capitano, thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you this evening in the studio. And also thanks for accepting our invitations. And I believe today the listeners and those watching us online will really get the real information, because we have the expert in. Yeah. And before we go into our today's topic, which is aviation industry in South Sudan, you are as in the studio as the professional pilot and also the technical advisor in the Ministry of Transport and the member of board of directors of South Sudan Civil Aviation. The question that I need to ask, why not medicine? Just you choose piloting.
Great. That is a very long story. During my education career, early ages, I came to love flying, aviation. And by doing that, I thank God that I worked very hard to see if one day I could become a pilot. And I worked through that. And I believe in one saying, what the English always say, many people say, whenever there is a will, there is a way. And I succeeded to make it. In 1985, in 1982, that is the time I graduated from Oxford Air Training School in October 11. So that is in brief.
Thank you, Capitano.
Okay.
Baria?
Yes, thank you so much, Captain David, for this brief introduction about yourself. Remember, if you have just tuned in, we are going to be discussing about aviation industry in South Sudan. And with us in the studio is Captain David Martin Hassan, and he is the technical advisor at the Ministry of Transport, and he's also member of board of directors at South Sudan Civil Aviation Authority. We'll give you a chance later on to call in and ask your questions about our topic of the day. So Captain David, if you can just give us a brief overview about the aviation industry here in South Sudan, what it is, how it even started.
Thank you very much, Baria, Radio. Aviation industry in South Sudan is not separated from overhaul. When you look on overhaul description of aviation all over the world, aviation means simply the manufacturing and the operationalization of the planes and the institutions which support the operation of the airlines. That's in very simple terms. That has been existing, of course, in South Sudan before and after the independence. From that description, we can generate a lot of questions later out of that, but that is a simple understanding of the aviation industry. That means all together the airlines, how to operate, how they run their operation. The qualification of the staff is part of the operation. The qualification of their institutions, the standard of their institutions, how they are complying with the present today aviation regulations, what we are actually terming in aviation as SAPs, standard and recommended practices. This can amalgamate all the efforts together that aviation in South Sudan is not out of that. It should operate within that category, as standard and recommended practices should be maintained.
Yes.
So that is simple to define the aviation industry.
Okay.
Okay, Captain. Then how will you describe aviation industry in South Sudan before and after the independence? Is there any existing?
Yeah, actually, what I could say is, how do I look into aviation industry before the independence in South Sudan, which is 2011?
Yeah.
How do I look
Yeah.
into the aviation industry
Yeah.
inside South Sudan,
Sudan, yeah.
before 2011? And that is the time when we were still under one Sudan. And then after the 2011, after we became an independent country. So before that, in 2011, the aviation industry in South Sudan, I can say, is not meeting most of the standards required in all aspects. Aviation, you talk about the airports, talk about the companies operating. By then, no company operating in Juba before 2011. Why? Because we were not the overall civil aviation authority. The whole civil aviation authority was in Khartoum. Therefore, we are only receiving part of services from Khartoum at that time. As a result, the aviation infrastructure in South Sudan, which is part of aviation industry, like the airports, were not in place. Starting from the airports, if you take Juba Airport, starting with the most populated airport, if you take Wow Airport, if you take Malakal Airport, and today you can talk of other main towns growing, like Yambio, Torid, and so on and so forth. So I can say that the infrastructure in general, which actually give the power and the strength to the aviation, were poor, were not good enough. In addition to that, part of the aviation industry is the control of the airspace of the country, which falls under the air traffic control worldwide. And the air traffic control was poor, was not existing, and was not meeting the standard of our country after independence. That was actually highly neglected or not yet improved. The airport infrastructure, the passenger terminals, the security and safety oversight at all these airports were not being maintained. So that is, in simple terms, the situation where we were in before the independence, which I can say it is poor standards.
Okay.
Then after that, I believe that the government, together with the ministry concerned, which is the Ministry of Transport, has done a lot. I have to admit that we have done a lot to improve and raise the standard of aviation in our country.
Yes.
I can give examples for what has been done. For example, starting with our capital, Juba, where we have Juba International Airport. Today, although we are not yet satisfied that we have reached the standard, to satisfy everybody and to satisfy even ourselves, we have not reached that standard. But yet, what have been done at that time until now is something to be recognized as well. The runway itself at Juba Airport was in a very poor standard. No maintenance, a lot of things has to be done. Okay, the navigation aids were not there in place. Okay, the lighting system were not there in place, and all this affects the aviation. The terminal buildings, which are still suffering, has not yet been done. So some extent of work has been done in that area. As you can see, until from that time when the work finished in 2017, in December, the runway has been very comfortable receiving all types of aircrafts, up to Cat 4 Delta now, as we are talking. This was not existing before. We have other areas for improvement, like we've entered the ILS, Instrument Landing System, is a requirement to upgrade the standard of the airport, which is also done. Although, for some reasons beyond my concern, it's not operational now, as I can see, but this is for other reasons, which I cannot explain here. Okay? Yeah. So that is it in general. So today, aviation, but still needs a lot. What I've mentioned now, I mentioned Juba only. If you go to Wow Airport, it has been asphalted. It was gravel. Juba Airport, after it is rehabilitated, upgraded, and extended. Why extended? To be wide body aircraft, which we call in aviation as category 4 Delta, which is existing now. If you go to our airport, still the length is smaller, but it's better than when it was before independence. Yeah, that is the general picture. If you want us to go into the challenges later, I think that question will come.
Actually, it's our next question about the challenges. That what do you think are the challenges facing the growth of aviation industry here in South Sudan?
The challenges are many. I can summarize them briefly in one. One of the main challenges, which myself, as a government official, as somebody who was also participating in the development, participating in the development of aviation sector in South Sudan, the challenges are many. The first thing I have seen, which we managed to overcome partially, is that how to get the appropriate fund to develop. That one was obstructed since 2011 or 2012, when South Sudan started entering into conflicts with others. You know very well, in 2013, that was a terrible blow to South Sudan when that dispute happened, when that big fight happened. At that time, I was in the ministry. At that time, we were trying very hard to get good investors. Why investors? Because I strongly believe in the ministry that we cannot develop this whole infrastructure through the government budget alone. It is very difficult. Aviation needs a hell of money to develop it and bring it to the right standard. Government alone cannot do it through the budget, because there is a lot of priorities which is to be done. Health, education, power, a lot of things. That is why the policy in the ministry at that time was to divert, but in conjunction with the government, central government, our government in South Sudan, to convince so that we get investors with huge capitals to develop. And that's actually what happened for the rehabilitation of Juba International Airport. But that amount was huge. The government could not allow it in the budget and give it at the right time. You need to rehabilitate, upgrade the airport within 3 years, for example, which we have done. So we convinced, and the government supported the ministry, the policy of the ministry, by getting the investor in, okay, and they work and finish the work at the right time with the huge amount which is the government still liable to payback. Now, as I am talking, one of the huge projects going on in the ministry also to upgrade aviation is what they call the air traffic management system. That costs a huge amount of money, which we could not, as a government, to put it into the budget and get it at the right time. Okay, so it is going on very well. It's about to finish as we are talking. I hope very soon you will see it that is open, and that project is to improve most important aspect of the aviation industry, which is the air traffic control. It's a very big area to talk about. Yeah.
Okay.
So that war of 2013 is a terrible setback. Okay, not encouraging investors again to come in and get their money to invest in South Sudan. Okay, unfortunately after that we start to recover gradually 2014 and 15, and then the ministry was working very hard to convince the investors again to come back and continue the work. Unfortunately, once again, the 2016 event which happened, that scared everybody not to come to the country again to spend this huge amount of money to do it. So these are the main two big problems for the development of aviation sector.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Captain David. Let's go for a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back and continue with our topic. Be next to your radio.
أكاديمية فلاي أون تايم لعلوم الطيران بيقدم لك البرنامج الإذاعي اتكلم مع خبراء الطيران. البرنامج ده بيزودك بكل المعلومات المهمة واللي انت بتحتاج تعرفه عن مجال الطيران. اتكلم مع خبراء الطيران بيجيكم كل يوم السبت الساعة 3 بالمساء على الهواء وعلى الإنترنت فقط على أي راديو. عينك على جنوب السودان. أكاديمية فلاي أون تايم لعلوم الطيران حيث تبدأ الرحلة.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Haysom, the Secretary General's Special Representative in South Sudan and head of the UN Peacekeeping Mission, UNMISS. November the 25th is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. It marks the beginning of what we call the 16 Days of Activism. This civil society-led movement holds special meaning for us in South Sudan, where conflict and insecurity continue to affect women and girls disproportionately. This year's theme is titled Invest to Prevent Violence Against Women and Girls. The theme is timely, given that the nation is preparing for its first post-independence elections in December 2024. In that regard, I recall the government's recent decision to adopt the Maputo Protocol on women's rights in Africa. This treaty underscores the right to full and equal participation of women in the political life and decision-making of the nation. But for women to take up their role as change agents, they must be safe from harm. They must have access to education, livelihoods and employment in a way that empowers them to contribute to and benefit from the sustainable development of their nation. That's why for UNMISS, one of our top priorities is preventing sexual violence and helping the authorities to hold perpetrators to account. We also build the capacity of police, security forces, political leaders, community and traditional authorities, and others, so that the rights of all citizens can be respected, the needs of women and men are equally addressed, and the voices of women are heard, as well as their contributions acknowledged. UNMISS will continue to work with the government, the people of South Sudan, and the international community towards these goals. So, join us throughout the 16 days of activism and beyond as we seek to invest in a brighter future for all women and girls in South Sudan.
Fly On Time Aviation Science Academy presents to you Talk to Aviation Experts radio program, a program that feeds you with the aviation general knowledge that you need to know about the aviation industry. Talk to Aviation Experts comes to you every Saturday at 3 p.m. on air and online, only on iRadio, your eye on South Sudan. Fly On Time Aviation Science Academy, where the journey starts.
Yes, welcome back from that short commercial break. And of course, if you have just tuned in, you're listening to iRadio, your eye on South Sudan. My name is Barry Johnson, and this is Talk to Aviation Expert program. This program usually comes to you every Saturday from 3 to 4. And every week, I'm not alone, of course. I have my co-host, Cesar Gubang. And in today's episode of this very program, we are discussing actually about aviation industry in South Sudan, and mainly focusing on the past, present, and how this very industry will look like in the future. Remember, this program is brought to you by Fly On Time Aviation Sciences Academy. Yes, Cesar.
Thank you, Barry. Captain David, you say earlier about the control of the airspace by Sudan. Currently, Sudan is in war. How South Sudan now is managing this airspace?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. The best person who should answer this question now should be the Civil Aviation Authority currently in action.
Okay.
But I'm still part of the Ministry of Transport. I will go back, because the whole history of the air traffic management system it happened during my time when I was the Undersecretary for 10 years. In 2017, in 2017 exactly, we started to build up with the idea of air traffic management system. And that system is a very huge system in aviation which controls the airspace. And that need came as a result of successive meetings at the time when I was sitting as the Undersecretary between the leadership of the ministry, which includes the minister and myself, and the Civil Aviation Authority in South Sudan, how to get our airspace out from the third party. Because currently, since independence, the airspace is being run by a third party. It is our right, after the independence in 2011, to run our airspace. But there were challenges since 2012 when we raised it up in the ministry, at the level of ministry concerned. And we had several meetings with our regional ICAO offices. We belong to Nairobi office, which is called ISAF, Eastern African Office, which connects us to ICAO, which is the international office which runs the aviation all over the world. At that time, we worked very hard as a team, myself and my ministers, and even the cabinet. We worked very hard to raise the technical proposal, because after a series of meetings with the people responsible for aviation, overseeing us, as I mentioned, which is the regional office in Nairobi where we belong to, they showed us the way out, that you should do 1, 2, 3, 4 in order for you to own your airspace. Not as any people used to believe, that immediately after the independence we got up in the morning and we think that, oh, we are controlling our airspace. No, it was not like that. So that idea, we had to correct it, but we had a lot of work to do. So we started from that time. I myself, plus my colleagues in South Sudan, a technical board of 7 people were formed on the advice of ICAO, and 7 people the same from the third country which is running. And we had to sit together. We had the meeting in Nairobi, United Nations office, where the ICAO office is located. We had 2 meetings there, and we had another meeting in Cairo. All result into what we should do, what duties we should do to have our airspace. That is in full coordination with our cabinet, because the Council of Ministers of the cabinet is the overall authority of the country to approve any policy, which was done, and the cabinet approved. Several approvals are there for the plan which is laid down by then the Minister of Transport to see into it that the airspace is retrieved from the third country. To the extent in 2018 we had a very big meeting, very wider, broader meeting in the Council of Ministers with the Minister concerned of Transport, myself, Civil Aviation, in the cabinet, and the approval was given ahead. One of the things during the time when we were going, that the air traffic management is going to be the full solution. Okay, after it is completed, it has to be inspected and audited by the International Civil Aviation Organization, and that is based on regulations. When we finish it, it has to be audited. That is meeting the minimum standards required by aviation, and then the airspace will be released to us, to South Sudan. In addition to that, we have to maintain also, our civil aviation has to meet the minimum and standard recommendations required by ICAO and to be audited, which was two things to lead us into acquiring our airspace. That went on quite well, and an agreement has to be signed between South Sudan and the third country, which is Sudan, okay, for having to us to delegate. This was approved also by Council of Ministers of the Republic, okay. This was on recommendation of ICAO. By then, they have to run it, and we have to renew that agreement every 2 years. Why 2 years? Because we're expecting from 2017, 2020, we should have finished the air traffic management system, which is a requirement, and the ICAO auditing. And by then, we should have our airspace.
Yes.
So a lot of technical work was done. We cannot explain everything in this short time.
Yeah.
And that is the reason why the third country was running it. Coming to your question, what is the situation now? Although I'm the technical advisor in the ministry,
Yeah.
but the best person to answer it is the civil aviation of South Sudan, to my knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. We are in crisis because the airspace is being run by a third person, and it happened that today he is even disabled.
Yeah.
He's disabled. Yeah.
But yeah.
اوكي ثانك يو سو ماتش كابتن ديفيد. لكل زول بيسمع لاي راديو في زمن ده، هذا برنامج بتاع يتكلم مع خبراء الطيران اللي بيجيكم كل يوم السبت من الساعه 3 للساعه 4. الليله احنا قاعدين نتكلم عن مجال بتاعه الطيران في جنوب السودان، هو كان كيف في الماضي وحسي كيف وحيكون كيف بعدين في المستقبل. زمن جاء عشان احنا نشيل مكالمات بتاعكم. ارقامنا 0911 0922 986 986. اذا انت عندك اي سؤال لضيف بتاعنا في داخل الاستوديو. معنا في الاستوديو كابتن ديفيد مارتن حسن، وهو تكنيكال ادفايزر في Ministry of Transport، هو كمان member of Board of Directors في South Sudan Civil Aviation Authority. If you have any questions, you can drop them in our comment section on Facebook Live, and also you can call us on 0911 or 0922 986 986. Yes, Captain David, you mentioned the main challenge that is facing the aviation industry, and you talked about the funding to develop the industry. How do you think that can be addressed, this main challenge you mentioned? But before that, let's pick this call. Hey, radio. Okay, you can call us back. Remember, our numbers remains the same: 0911 0922 986 986. Hey, radio. هلا يا
يوحاني سكور من الرنج.
اتفضل يوحاني سكور من الرنج.
بشكر ضيفك على إيضاح هذا المعلومات.
نعم.
بكل صراحة إن طيراننا في جنوب السودان هي طيران لخوف الناس لهذا الحاجة. لأن طيراننا أنا ما أعرف هل عدم وجود الفنية كافية أو خبرة كافية، لذلك حوادثه كثير وبيكلفنا أرواح وبيكلفنا أموات. يلا أنا داير أعرف الأسباب ترجع بأن عدمت مواصفات الطيران بجنوب السودان بمواصفات العالمية ولا بترجع قلة الخبرة الفنية. أما بالنسبة مثلا للسفر مثلا السفر الخارجي والداخلي المطلوب من المسافر شنو الإجراءات المتبعة مثلا للسفر للخارج أو للداخل. وشكرا.
نعم اوكي شكرا يوهاني سكور من رنج لاتصال بتاعك 0911 او 0922 986 986. اي راديو. هلو اي راديو. نعم مرحبا.
اي راديو.
نعم
كابتن ديفيد.
نعم قول لنا اسمك اول حاجه وانت ضارب من وين؟
تفضل.
ملك جورج من واو. كابتن ديفيد.
نعم تفضل منود.
كيف؟
مبروك كويس.
دمجي لكابتن ديفيد.
نعم
المفروض طيران يبقى كثير. لما بقينا جنوب السودان بقينا دولة تلقوا في تجار مشى خشوم مشى عالمي. طيران القدام بقى يضربوا بوه وشنو وبعمل لهم برنامج شو سمع كل كين ده طيران عمره وانتهى وجات دخلوا في جنوب السودان يبقى يعمل لنا تعذيب. سؤال بمشي له كيف يعني قبل المفروض يعملوا فاس وبعد الطيارة مدة كم زمن وكم سنين كيف يعني كيف يخش في جنوب السودان ما بتعمل يعني والإجراءات شنو كيف يعني شركات زي دي الأوام زي ده بتاع طيران كشف كيف هو بتاع الكرشي بتاعنا معروف في العالم في جنوب السودان.
اوكي
شكرا كثير.
Okay, شكرا كثير Manu Georgie من wow. Maybe Captain David, you can take these two questions and then we'll open the serial line again. Johannes Kur is talking about the aviation industry becoming scary to the passenger.
Yeah.
How can this be addressed? And Manu Georgie is asking, are there standards أو في مواصفات مقاييس للطيارات اللي بيدخلوا هنا عشان يجي يشتغلوا in the country? I think briefly that is his question.
Yeah.
Maybe you can take these two questions and then we can proceed.
Okay, I will talk in Arabic.
Okay,
so that the questions are very clear.
Yeah.
And I will try to answer so that they can also listen from me directly.
نعم.
بالنسبة للأخ يوانس شكرا للسؤال بتاعتك وشكرا لاهتمامك برضو وافتكر ده اهتمامنا وهمومنا كمان كله كناس في الحكومة. انت تكلمت عن حوادث الطائرات وإجراءات السفر. نعم حوادث الطائرات هي في الحقيقة مقلقة بالنسبة لنا كثيرا نحن كمسؤولين وبرضو كمواطنين.
نعم.
مقلقة لنا شديد جدا وحوادث ده يعني مرعبة ويتطلب مزيدا من الإجراءات من السلطات المختصة عندنا في جنوب السودان حتى نحن نوقفه. نحن عايشين في هذا الجو معكم سوا ونحن نعمل الكثير ونتمنى أن ترى الضوء قريب. أصواتنا برضو بتصل لجهات بتصنع القرار.
نعم.
عشان نقدر نحن ما نقدر نقول نوقف الحوادث نهائيا ولكن هي لازم تكون لدرجة مقبولة عالميا. فأنا بشكرك لهذا السؤال وأنا برضو بنوصله للسلطات العليا عندنا في الوزارة وأنا طبعا تحت الوزير هنوصل الاهتمام بتاعتك ده لجهات المختصة واقتراحاتنا برضو بالإصلاح.
نعم.
اقتراحاتنا بالإصلاح لا بد أن يكون في اقتراح للإصلاح لأنه فاقد شيء لا يعطيه. أما إجراءات السفر فبرضو هي داخلة في كل في إجراءات السلامة. فنعترف بأنه هناك في خلل ما ممكن تحصل حوادث كل سنة ونقول ما فيش خلل. هناك خلل وعلينا أن ندرك هذا الخلل حتى نحن نصححها.
نعم.
ونتمنى يكون إجابتي لك satisfactory أو واضح.
اوكي نمشي للسؤال بتاعت ماني جورجي وهو بيسأل عن هل في مواصفات معينة أو بيفحصوا الطيارات اللي بيدخل جنوب السودان قبل ما يبدو الشغل؟
نعم الأخ جورج من واو مشكورا. طبعا أنت بتعرفني وأنا بعرفك ولكن لما نتكلم في مجال الطيران نعم نحن كمسؤولين بنسعى على أساس أنه الطيران المدني بتاعتنا، بنسعى كمسؤولين أنه الطيران المدني في جنوب السودان هي الجهة الوزارة والدولة ادتها هذه المسؤولية بتاع صلاحية الطائرات. صلاحية الطائرات هي نقطة مهمة جدا، وهذه الحوادث اللي بتحصل في داخل اختصاص بتاع الطيران المدني في جنوب السودان. ولذلك نحن كمان ساعين في الوزارة على أساس أنه يكون في تحسين، أنه الحوادث الطائرات لازم تقيف، وما فيش طريقة الكلام ده تحصل إلا نرجع ونطبق القوانين الدولية بأظافرها. وعندنا قوانين برضو في جنوب السودان. We have to apply the standard and recommended practices and regulations correctly.
Yes.
And this will minimize and to the minimum acceptable all these accidents which are happening.
Yes.
This is what I could say.
اوكي شكرا كثير كابتن ديفيد. انا بتمنى انه اسئله حقتكم كل يكون جاوبوه. 0911 او 0922 986 986 اذا انت عندك اي سؤال لكابتن ديفيد مارتن حسن هنا في داخل الاستديو اللي بيتكلم عن الطيران في جنوب السودان. اي راديو
الو.
نعم اي راديو.
عبيكم هاي راديو عوض حسن الشيخ.
نعم عوض اتفضل.
عوض حسن الشيخ.
ضيفك الكريم، نحن فخورون بأخونا كابتن ديفيد، وبجد بيقولوا العمل بيدوا للشخص المناسب في المكان المناسب. في مشاكل بالنسبة للطيران، وده بنحتاج منه جهود منه كثير يا ناس. حتى في الولاية هنا عندنا مشكلة بتاعت انه كان تركب الطيارة اللي تجيب دولار، يعني ما بيتفاوض.
اللي يركب الدولار ما بيتفاوض،
يعني شوية صعب علينا. أنا مرات كنت أتفاوض وما عندك دولار. الدولار. سؤالي الثاني هو قلت في خصوص وداير إصلاح المانع وين عشان هو يكون يعمل الإصلاح. ده يمكن سؤالي، وبقول له هو إنسان في مكان مناسب وبدأ في منشأ مناسب. أتمنى إنه هو يعني يبذل جهود على أساس إنه طيران هي عمود الفقر للدولة. شكرا.
اوكي alright. شكرا كثير عوض الاتصال بتاعك من واو. Yes Captain David, you can take that and then we continue with the rest of the questions because we are running out of time.
اوكي شكرا للاخ عوض حسن الشيخ اذا سميت اسمه كويس.
نعم.
نشكرك شديد لهذا السؤال. بالنسبه لتكاليف السفر فعلا هي نقطه برضو ما فايت علينا، نحن شايفينه والوجع ده وصلتنا كله. وفي الوزاره ان شاء الله بنشتغل على اساس نرفع صوتنا للجهات العليا المختصه حتى أن نشوف. لكن في النهاية الطيران أساسا هي مكلفة، الطيران مكلفة. وزي ما قلت هسه بيقولوا في واو مثلا أنت تدفع بالدولار، دايرة معالجة الكلام ده. فلكن عندنا بعض الصعوبات والتحديات أنا بعتقد في ذلك المجال، لأنه عمل الطيران كلها مربوطة بالعملة الصعبة برا، وهذا يحتاج لعمل كبير جدا بين الوزارة والطيران المدني المختص والجهات الحكومية العليا حتى ينظروا لأهمية بتاع تقليل تكاليف السفر، وهذا يمكن. فنحن في الوزارة في قيادة الوزارة برضو هنرفع تقرير في هذا المجال على أساس أنه يشوفوا إذا ممكن يصلوا لحل فيه.
نعم. اوكي خلينا نرجع للسؤال بتاع التشالنجز او التحديات. كيف ممكن بعض التحديات اللي يواجه الافيشن اندستري في جنوب السودان ممكن يحلوه؟ انت كان اتكلمت عن الفاندنج عشان يكون في عشان يعملوا بيه ديفلوبمنت. انت بتشوف how can these challenges be overcome?
These challenges, the challenge to develop aviation industry sector in South Sudan needs a huge amount of fun. For example, I dig misal,
No.
because during my lifetime in aviation, we passed through this experience. We are not talking out of mind.
No.
ما كلام بتا كتاب كلام هنا جربناه يعني. As being the technical advisor, I was the under secretary for 10 years. Before that, I was running an aviation company myself, Feeder Airline, for 5 years. Before that, I was flying in Sudan Airways for 27 years, whereby I was in the management also of Sudan Airways. So, based on this experience, some countries which try to improve aviation, and this is an example, to improve aviation drastically, like Qatar Airways, they started in 1996. They didn't have even a single aircraft, but they started. Even they borrowed pilots from Sudan, where I was with, from Sudan Airways, my colleagues. Today, where are they? They have 250 aircraft. They are categorized one of the best 3 or 4 airlines in the world. How did that happen? Because there was a policy willing to develop aviation in that country. There was a will. There was a will, okay, to develop aviation in that country. Therefore, I go back to ourselves. If we have the will, we can do it. We are assisting our government with such policies, as I mentioned to you, that it needs a huge amount of money. The 2 big projects which I talk about, it cost nearly over $400 million within 3 years to be built. Imagine such a huge amount of money, which is nearly half the budget of South Sudan. It's not easy. Even if the government has got this money, being also a member of the government, I cannot be selfish, say that my aviation is a priority and you must give me the money. I cannot even be courageous enough to say that. So what we did, and we succeeded, is to encourage third country which have good relation, I will not mention the name, with Sudan. We recommended them to the government, and the government accepted the recommendation, and they managed to fund the first project of Juba International Rehabilitation and Extension, and the current project which is going on, the air traffic management system, which is a huge project. So this challenge of fund is there. As I told you, our country is passing through, we passed actually through critical 2 periods, 2013 and 2016. Thus, there was a terrible back on our economy, on our oil, on our, so all these are issues. So how to encourage? Now, the only way is to get investors in, with good conditions, okay, to help us in developing this aviation huge sector. So this is the challenge, and this is also the solution.
Okay. All right, thank you. Before we go further, let's go for a short commercial break, and then when we get back, we'll continue with our discussion.
أكاديمية فلاي أون تايم لعلوم الطيران بيقدم لك البرنامج الإذاعي اتكلم مع خبراء الطيران. البرنامج ده بيزودك بكل المعلومات المهمة واللي انت بتحتاج تعرفه عن مجال الطيران. اتكلم مع خبراء الطيران بيجيكم كل يوم السبت الساعة 3 بالمساء على الهواء وعلى الإنترنت فقط على أي راديو. عينك على جنوب السودان. أكاديمية فلاي أون تايم لعلوم الطيران حيث تبدأ الرحلة.
How much time remaining?
Okay, welcome back from that short commercial break. As I said earlier, if you have just tuned in, you are listening to Talk to Aviation Expert program, and it usually comes to you from 3 to 4. We are talking about the aviation industry in South Sudan, and we are mainly focusing on the past, present, and the future. Yes, Caesar?
Okay, Captain David, thank you very much. Thank you, Barry. You talk about the findings. Apart from the findings, I saw so many...
Funding?
Yeah.
Funding?
Yeah.
Okay.
So many South Sudanese stakeholders try their level best in order to establish local airlines, which is feeder airline a part of them. Apart from the funding, what challenges do you see for us as a South Sudanese?
As South Sudanese now, I think we can go directly. One of the main challenge we must have a national carrier. It is a challenge. South Sudan, by this time, 10 years, we should have a national carrier. هو الناقل القومي لجنوب السودان. So, ده تحدي, or this is a challenge. Why? Public, all these questions which are answered here could be solved within that if it is established. How to establish it is a very long story. Maybe we need a complete 1 hour or more to talk about it.
Yes.
But this is a policy in the Ministry of Transport where I belong to, okay? And this policy started since 2013 with coordination with high authorities to establish a national carrier. Now, to come back to it, we need substantial fund. We need substantial fund. Not only fund is the problem, the fund and other technical issues, because we are now building an aviation industry. It's part of aviation industry which we are trying to build. And I mean by that, without having a national carrier, we are just deceiving ourselves. We'll never make proper professionals in aviation. Even the training locally we have here, it will be connected when you have the national aviation, when you have the national carrier. Because that is where our children, our young children will be well trained, prepare them for the future, using our present experience to guide them in the right direction. It's not happening. Coming back to your question, we are scattering efforts by giving, aviation is not a field whereby you can see people are building shops around Juba. If I build a shop here, somebody is coming to build the next, and then you can see in a very small place 10 or 15 or 100 shops. Aviation is not like that. And that is based on the international standards. That is one of the things we need more time to talk lengthily into this area.
Yes.
Aviation needs concentration. Aviation needs also زي ما بقولوا بالعربي فاقد شيء لا يعطيه. If I know nothing, I cannot go to the theater and say I'm going to operate a patient.
Yes.
I'm lying to myself and I'm going to kill the person. So, from this you can understand. I myself, I'm talking from experience, being a pilot for 27 years. When I established a small company called Feeder Airline, I can call it a small company, I was the manager, and I was the pilot, and I was everything. It worked for 5 years. To my belief, I think it was excellent. But it was very tough, if not because the little experience I had when I was in that national carrier, okay, which I have injected and helped me to make that country. On top of that is the management. If you don't have the correct management, then you are wasting your time with all the huge amount of fun I'm talking about. If you don't have the right management in the right place, all this money is just poured in the sea. You'll never have the return for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. You talk about future. How do you look into the future of aviation industry in South Sudan 5 to 10 years?
That will likely depend on how far we are going to come back strictly to implement the aviation ABCs. If we identify ourselves where we are together, and then we start putting dots properly, then we'll be able within very short time to raise the aviation industry in South Sudan within a very short time. But the first thing is to identify the areas, the loop areas, and get the right corrective actions into it. You mentioned companies flying. You have to go. If you make a study, you'll see that they are not actually flying on proper ethics of aviation. proper ethics of aviation. And that's why they are not surviving. Not only that, they also inflate the market. They inflate the market, and it is us and our people who are going to pay more dearly on that one. Safety standards will not be maintained properly, and that will reflect also on them. So our future is great, especially South Sudan is a landlocked country. Don't forget that. South Sudan is a landlocked country. South Sudan needs a lot of huge development in so many sectors, agriculture, other areas, all over the country. If we could have a proper peace to maintain, and that's number one requirement, because you cannot development without having a proper stability everywhere. That is number one. The rest are easy. South Sudan can prosper. Aviation will make all these areas to build up quickly. The agriculture area and other areas will build up very quickly. So aviation today is a requirement for South Sudan, which is being a landlocked country.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Captain David. We are left with a few minutes. Before we go to your last message, let's see some of the few comments we have on our Facebook. We have Redento Ladu. He's watching live from Ethiopia. He says, good program. One of the challenge civil, I think he means civil aviation, need to be financially independent without interference of revenue authorities. The countries which are rapidly growing in aviation sectors, their respective that are rapidly growing in their respective civil aviation authority because they are financially independent. Thank you, Regento, who is watching live from Ethiopia. Coming back to you, Captain David, what is your last message as we, in less than 1 minute, what is your last message to listeners and also all those who have been following us online?
I thank the listeners. I thank the listeners so much on their questions, and I'm sure so many could not get chance now to raise their voice. Also, I hope in the near future we'll be able to hear them. The door is open to listen for them, because together with them we'll be able to put the right corrective action forward together. Aviation is very important to all of them and to us, and we need to work together, all of us, to see into it that we improve into this sector to the best.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Caesar.
Thank you, Maria, Captain David. Thank you very much, and we expect to see you more and more in the studio.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to all those who have followed with us the program. And remember, we'll be coming here every Saturday from 3 to 4. This very, very program is brought to you by Fly Ontime Aviation Sciences Academy. Remember, they are located next to Mubi Roundabout inside Techno Building, the 3rd floor. From me, Barry Johnson, I would love to say thank you all, and of course continue listening to iRadio, your eye on South Sudan.
Fly Ontime Aviation Science Academy presents to you Talk to Aviation Experts radio program, a program that feeds you with the aviation general knowledge that you need to know about the aviation industry. Talk to Aviation Experts comes to you every Saturday at 3 p.m. on air and online, only on